the regular scheduled board meeting of the Othello School District Board of Directors with a flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome our guests tonight.
¿Habrá necesidad de traducción al español para alguien esta noche? Gracias.
And I'll entertain a motion for the agenda.
I have some changes before we get to that. I wanted to add under events. Let me make sure that that was the only thing. Yeah, under events, I wanted to add. It's thinking. Hold on. Maybe. For the Seussical, the musical drama club, the dates are actually the 14th, 15th, and 16th is at 7 p.m. And the 16th also has a matinee at 1 p.m. That is at the auditorium. And then I put it down as high school band holiday concert. Maybe that's McFarland now. On December 5th at the high school at 7 p.m. So that would be the high school, right?
Yes, it's the high school.
Okay.
High school.
I know you're in that, so I kind of looked at you. And both Othello High and McFarland have their holiday choir concert on the 9th at 7 p.m. That's actually the same time as one of our board meetings, but that is the time for that too. So I just wanted to add those. And that was the only other changes that I would like to make.
So not a change of the agenda, just an addition of
Right,
announcements. Okay.
yes. So then I will make a motion to approve it.
Motion by Director Stevenson to approve.
Second.
Second by Director Garza. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item B1, is there any public comments, requests? Okay. So we'll move on to item B2, board member discussions. First item is legislative report.
So I wanted to, some things I wanted to address were our December board meetings. On the CBHA school district calendar says December 16th. It is really on Wednesday, December 18th at noon, not on the 16th, which is a Monday at 7, like the calendar says. And then for under our calendar in policies, I think it's GP 7.1. I'm doing this from memory. Oh, yay. It has that we are doing a bunch of student rep stuff. On December 2nd, we're doing a training, and on December 9th, we're doing interviews. And so I am not sure that those dates are things we still want to keep, or I know that we're discussing that in our later, it's in the agenda. With the leadership students, I don't know if that will still work. But then I also was checking some other elected officials' websites and wanted to compare to what school board's for the school district, what school board has on our site. Our school board has a map, our email addresses, our photos, bios, our names, but does not have terms. You know, when we started and when we ended, or possibly how long someone has been on. City Council, I just wanted to compare to others. City Council has name, email, term, photo, but no map. I've actually personally never known what district I'm in for them. County Commissioners has a map, nothing else. Doesn't have a list of names, terms, anything. And Hospital Board has names only. So I think that we have some great information, but I think that it would be great to have our terms on there as well. I don't know if that's something that that everyone else would agree on.
See one
Yeah,
nod.
it's easy to add.
Right. I hope, at least, since we're not the ones that are actually adding it.
Mike, what are your thoughts?
That'd be fine.
Sounds like,
I mean, that would be information for the
majority.
public, I mean, we know our terms, but
Right.
that'd be easy for them to.
Yes.
Tune
For
in.
people to be able to see those details, I think are nice. And it wouldn't be bad to also have been on the board since date or something. I'm not sure if that's not essential, but can't hurt, I think, to see those things as well. So that was actually all of the legislative, elected official, more like stuff that I had.
I have a quick question. When are because I think I just put them wrong in my calendar. When are like the board meetings for December? Because I think I just
The
put 'em down.
9th and
Okay.
the 18th.
Okay, because I have it down for the 23rd, because I just went the 2nd and 4th. And I was like, I don't think that's right.
Right.
So the 18th is noon like last year?
Yes, because payments can't be made until we approve that, so it kind of holds things up for
Okay,
everybody.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you.
okay. Next item is the WASDA annual meeting or annual conference. That is on November 21st through the 24th. I believe there was 5 spots held at the hotel, everything for board members. So I guess the request would be, Tilly, if you could reach out to the newly elected board members and find out who's attending there.
Yeah, I called both of them today.
Okay, all right. Anything else on that? And the first day is always like a new board member, kind of the
Boot
early
camp.
bird, right?
Right, boot camp is
Okay.
always
that-
good and interesting.
Wednesday?
I'm
And then
not
Thursday,
sure.
Friday, Saturday is the bulk of the meeting?
Yep.
Thursday, Friday mostly, then there's something Saturday till about noon.
It says it's until the 24th.
Is the 24th a Saturday or Sunday?
So boot camp is on Thursday, the 21st, from 11 to 4.
Oh, let's do Sunday now. They've gone back and forth with that. I thought they went back to Saturday.
And so that is really great for newly elected people to understand and to be able to connect with other brand-new people and get some great info. They have an open government training from 4:15 to 6. Has anybody done that? Does anybody know what that is?
That would be the training for OPMA.
OPMA.
It's
Which-
required for
Oh,
all
okay.
yes, new board members.
Right. And reduce for every once in a while for those that are on. So it looks like it doesn't really start until Friday.
Friday is the main conference.
Yes. And then all through, closing keynote is on Sunday is at 11. I'm sorry, at 10.
Okay.
So,
Any other discussions on that subject? So we'll move on then to school board meeting with leadership students. This was discussed last meeting, possibly the meeting before. And so you had asked for that to be on there, Jen, as well. We talked about the school board actually going in and talking to leadership students at the high school and at Desert Oasis to explain what the board does and what they're looking for. So,
Was the district gonna find out what worked for the schools, when we could come? Did they come up with dates?
So we haven't received a response from OHS yet. I know that they were just trying to figure some dates out for us and they were gonna get back to us, but DOHS did respond and they are available this Thursday or Friday at 1:30 or 2 p.m.
Same time for both?
Yes, and actually they were available today as well, but since we have a board meeting, we weren't gonna discuss until today.
1:30 to 2 or 1:30 or 2?
They put 1:30 or 2.
Were they assuming half an hour meeting then? Is that?
Yeah, I believe so.
Can anybody do that?
I'm available either day.
I could do either day also.
Okay. Due to, those days would both, and times would both be difficult for me this week. Do you two want to go to Desert Oasis?
I
Yeah.
can.
Okay.
That'd be great.
And-
Thursday works best for me, Ken.
Thursday, and at 1:30.
Thursday at 1:30, yes.
Do I still, like, can I still attend for the leadership meeting? Is that all right?
Yes.
Like, I want to go, but I don't want
Yes.
to.
You get a lot of
Yes.
answers that we can't answer.
Okay, cool.
Questions, I mean. And
Okay.
then, for Desert, or for the Othello High, do you want to just email us options and then we'll email respond for who and what can do that? Okay. And then Taylor and I were talking today about whether she should go to WASDA or do we've taken student reps in the past, but her term is nearly done. Do you want to go?
I have a engagement on Saturday. So if I went for, because you're saying how Thursday is more for like new board members, and then Friday would be like, Friday and Saturday and Sunday would be like the bulk of it. But if I needed to be back on Saturday, I guess the kind of issue is like, I really want to go, but like if my term's ending in a month, I don't know how to explain it. Like how
Do we feel like it's imperative for Taylor to go, I think? Is that a good way
Yeah.
for us to say it to you? Without?
I think it'd be up to her. I think if she wants to go there for Friday,
mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if you'd come back that same evening or early Friday morning or Saturday morning.
That would be like the transportation thing.
Yeah.
It's in Bellevue, right? That was this year. Yeah, it'd be the transportation.
You'd be missing a lot of content if you just went up Friday, so I would say that it
Yeah.
might not be worth the trip.
Okay, just because. Okay, that makes sense.
'Kay.
Awesome, thank you.
So then, wait to hear back on OHS, and ready to move on to the next item, right? All right, B3, student representative reports. Taylor.
Okay, so part of my report was a school play. That's kind of already been discussed. The drama club has been working really hard on their first musical, and Mr. Christensen said about like 15 years. So that's pretty big. There's a lot of things that go into it, and I'm sure everybody knows that football is going to state. So that's really exciting. It is up in Linden this Saturday, and they're playing at 5, I believe, or either way, I don't remember. Either playing at 5 or about to be there at 5. OHS students, we have about 6 OHS students as of Friday that are going into the armed forces. So that's really exciting, especially for our Veterans Day Assembly. They recognize them. And that's really all I have. We're kind of in between sports seasons, so there's not really a lot of extracurricular. And then I had a question about the status of like the student rep kind of meeting, or like what action would be taken from here. Because I know that's been the hot seat.
Do we want to keep the date of a training on December 2nd? Do we think that that's enough time to talk to both schools? And according to Taylor's suggestion, we need to totally revamp that training completely.
Yes.
So someone would need to create that too. Maybe Taylor could create that.
I would love to be a part of it.
Okay.
I would love to
That
be a part
sounds
of
fair.
it.
In regards to keeping that training, do you want to see what kind of response you get? After Ken and Mike go on Thursday, see what if there's interest, or see how many people are.
Because I think the question from them will be, what's next? If I'm interested, what do we do next? And so we almost have to have some kind of answers, I think. So I think that depending upon the high school, I mean, that's really not far out, but that's a ways away that I think that is reasonable to say the 2nd would work.
When we're talking about revamping the whole thing, in regards to that, what if we didn't do a PowerPoint? Like, you know what I mean? What if we handed out sheets or something that could be a little bit different than sitting? Because if you have the same kids that show up and you pull up a PowerPoint, they're gonna go, "Oh no," you know what I mean? So if we were, I'm trying to think of a way to make it different and make it more. I hate to say interesting, but
But you want to say interesting.
yeah.
And this doesn't follow that interesting concept, but what if we handed out the GPs that we have for student reps? Then they can take something home with them if they have questions. I mean, it says it all right there in
Yeah.
black and white, what we want, what the requirements are, all that kind of stuff, so that could be referred to. And then maybe we could like drop flowers on the edges or something. Maybe that will make it more exciting for the excitingness part that's being requested.
Well, it's just because
Meetings are not always exciting and fun, you're right.
what I'm beating around the bush is due to the result of the other meetings that have happened.
So you want us to take away the policy governance training beforehand,
Yes.
accept applications,
And then
pick our person, and then do our policy governance training afterwards.
I feel like that would be the most.
Right, but you did say before to do this is what a student rep
Yes.
does
Yes,
training.
absolutely. Not just say, "Oh, cool, you're on the board. Now this is what you're gonna do." Like, inform them what the students rep would be doing and what their direct action would be. But I feel like, but I really like the policy after.
Okay,
So the training on December 2nd, I don't think is too soon. I think that
I think
hopefully you can meet with
we should keep it.
OHS next week even, maybe.
right, hopefully. And then even still have the plan for interviews on the 9th unless something changes. Except for, we won't have sworn people in. So it would be 3 of us would be picking. That date might have to change.
I don't think you have to have new board members seated before they can be part of it.
Before they pick it?
The board can decide to have a committee of the community pick the student reps that they want,
Okay,
That works.
unless it's in policy that specifically says the board will have to choose. Let's find out.
I think it is.
Is the student rep meeting at 7? Do we know where it is yet?
let me look that up. It has it in the calendar,
Which calendar? This one?
the big long one. It would have to be here because, no, it doesn't, on the 2nd. It says 6:30, December 2nd. Training for potential student reps.
And it would be.
I think here, if here is an option, I think here is the best spot.
That sounds good to me. That'll work.
It does say in GP 14.1 that just a part on time for an interview by school board. It doesn't say that it's only the school board that will be in that interview.
Okay. Great. I think that works then. Okay,
Okay.
great.
Anything else, Taylor?
No.
All right, we'll move on to item C1, required approvals.
I move that we approve the required approvals.
Been a motion by Director Stevenson to approve,
I will second that.
seconded by Director Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Next item, C2, November 2019 early accounts payable warrants. So it was after a lot of discussion at our last meeting. It was actually found that a board member cannot approve accounts payable if they are in there at all. That's the opinion of our attorney. And so we need to do a couple things. Yeah, Jen, you have a question?
Yes, I do. What happens if they're just getting reimbursed? Because there's a difference between getting paid for services and being reimbursed.
So the attorney did clarify that if they're just being reimbursed, then that is fine.
Okay,
Yes.
great. That's good to have that clarification. Thank you. All right.
So, just so I'm clear on this, with the first item, November 2019 early accounts payable warrants, has Director Johnson's company in there. And so this is separate for the board to vote on. Director Johnson would recuse himself.
Yes.
So I will entertain a motion.
I move we approve the November early accounts payable warrants.
Been a motion by Director Garza to approve,
Second.
second by Director Roy Lance.
I have some questions.
Okay.
She just reaches for the mic. Under these, can you tell me what CDW government is for $19,000?
Yeah, that is a license for basically security for student devices. So teachers can monitor what is on a student's Chromebook.
Okay. CBHA for $43,000?
Those are for birth to 3 services. They provide birth to 3 services for our
Okay.
those.
So is that a year worth or is that,
1 month.
okay? All right.
Now,
Did you have a question?
yeah, I had questions on those payments to CBHA in the past, and they said those were pass-through services? Is that true?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the state pays us per student, and then CBHA is just providing the services because per the state, the school district cannot provide the services ourselves.
Okay.
We
So
just get-
after they're over the age of 3, we can provide the services, but we contract with them to provide it before that stage?
Yes.
Right, okay. Committee for Children for $5,000?
So that is for social emotional learning supplies for Ludokaga and Scootney.
Okay. Ednetics, 1,200, I'm sorry. 120,000, thank you. And I know that actually, I want to know the details on this one.
So we have a lot of contracts with Ednetics. They support us a lot in technology. So that payment includes payments for the phone services, so 1 month of a phone service, internet for the year, cloud and data management, I believe that was for the year as well, and network support. So supporting our network and infrastructure.
So is the network also for the year, or is that just for the month?
I believe that was for the year.
Okay, so there's just a bunch of yearly payments there.
Yes.
I know that we get Ednetics
Yes.
bills every month, but this one was large enough that I needed to ask.
Yeah.
That is all of the questions I had on that section.
Okay.
I think we're ready for a vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
I need to state that I will abstain from the
Okay.
vote for services due to Johnson's class.
Aye for me in favor. Opposed? So the motion carries 4-0, one was recused. Or abstained. All right, so the next one is a voting correction for the October payroll, so we now have to, do we have to vote to rescind first? So we need a vote to rescind the October payroll approval.
I move that we rescind the October payroll for this line.
The October payroll approval from the board meeting on,
But that would be the whole
October
thing. If we say it that way, then
28th.
that would rescind all of it. Are we rescinding all of it, or are we
we're gonna
rescinding
rescind and revote.
this line? We're rescinding. Okay,
payroll.
I move that we rescind the October accounts payable vote.
There's been a motion by Director Stevenson to rescind the October payroll and accounts payable warrants vote from the last board meeting on October 28th.
I'll second that.
Second by Director Garza. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0 with one who abstained, Director Johnson. And now I'll accept a motion to approve.
I move we approve item C3 on the agenda, October payroll and warrant, and account payable warrants, voting correction.
Been a motion by Director Garza to approve.
I'll have to abstain from this vote also for services due to Johnson's class.
I'll second.
Second by Director Roy Lance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0, and Director Johnson abstained. So in the future, I think the idea was to have that one item, the accounts payable, automatically pulled from required approvals if there's a board member on there who's done work and being paid, and it will be just a separate item like it is tonight.
Or spouse or family member or something.
Yeah. Okay. Item C4, that is the Othello School District scorecard. I'm going to assume that Dr. Hurst wants to explain this a little bit to us.
Absolutely. So as you look at the scorecard, the first thing we would like to just speak about is just the approach, which was different from last year. Last year we had administrators and mainly our principals, assistant principals, and teaching and learning team and myself who had sat around and we looked at ends 1, 2, and 3, and we had developed a scorecard and we had developed some matrix that goes along with the scorecard. This year, we really wanted to go down to the classroom. So what you see before you is a collaborative approach between the teachers and administrators of OSD. So that's one of the great things that we really like about the metrics that you see before us is represents the ideas of not just the administrators, but also the conversations from the teachers. And really based on the conversation that we had at the end of last year when we presented on ends 1. And one of the things that we saw in the last scorecard was really some limited metrics. And we really had some information on the SBA, ELA, and mathematics. And we really had information on John Hattie's work, effect size. And I think when the board went through at that particular time, there were some comments about, we're really based on the metrics that were presented. We really recognize the work based on direct inspection, that you are doing a great job. However, based on what's presented to us, this is all we can do as a board, and we were rated that we needed more evidence. And we went back to the drawing table, we had the conversation, and again, it went down to the classroom. And again, this is a collaborative conversation between all of us about what the new metric's gonna be. So when you look at this, some of the things that we have in there, that was in there before about kindergarten readiness, you'll see that we have kindergarten readiness, 98th percentile. that's where we are right now, and we felt that 98 percentile over the next 3 years is certainly realistic. You might wonder, well, why not 100%? We feel that 98% really captures mostly all of our kiddos. When you see the Y Kids assessment, you'll see that based on the conversation, I think it was Director Johnson at that time, he had brought to everyone's attention about what Y Kids and the state have reported. And I think we were at 16.6%, and the state was at 45%. So there were some questions about that, and they have some different ways of capturing some data. So what we wanted to do is to be consistent as well. So we wanted to make sure that that was a metric for us this year and the years going forward. And what you see is a starting point, and where you see the ending point is where the state is. So we have said over a period of years, 3 years, that will be where the state is, and then future years to exceed that. So that's where we did the 10% jump every year. SBA, ELA, and mathematics are two metrics that we've seen before. The difference is the approach. And as I said, this went down to the classroom. So what was really unique is that every teacher and grade level was able to come up with individual goals per grade level. So say, for instance, at Hiawatha, they would talk to their grade levels, and they would come up with an ELA goal. And then they would come up with a school goal by averaging those goals together. And then looking across the district, we took all the goals and averaged them together. So that's where you see all of the 43%, 45%. And then we said, well, what's reasonable going into 2021 and 2022? So that's where those metrics came from. For STAR Math and STAR Reading, instead of looking at academic performance, proficiency, we're looking at growth. So compared to other students, we're looking at growth across the board. So 58% for this particular school year. That means our students are performing better than 58% of other students in the similar category. And then for 2021, 63%, and then 2022, 68%. And that's where the math and the reading came from.
So you said compared to students in their, like across the state, according to their demographics across the state,
Is that
or
across
what?
the state, or?
So with the STAR assessment, it's used nationally. So it's looking at students that fall within a certain, where they scored previously, and then looking at from all the previous years, what would be expected growth for those students, and then what would be exceeding that as well. And so the goals were set around that, those estimates from the STAR assessment.
So according to these kinds of numbers, then what would a year's worth of growth be? Because I can't really compare this to a year's worth of growth. So I guess I'm having a hard time comprehending what this would truly mean.
Sure. And I wish there was an easy answer for that. If, just use a couple of examples. So if a student, for whatever reason, they assess, and let's say they're a year and a half behind, where average would be for this assessment, then generally speaking, when they're that far of a deficit, there would be expected to have greater growth that next year. Versus, let's say a student is already in the 98th percentile for achievement. Well, they might have smaller growth expectation because their achievement level is already so high. And so that's where it looks like whenever you look at student growth percentiles, it's going to say for these students that scored at this level, it's expected that they would grow this amount. For these students that scored at this level, and then so every kind of band has its own variation of growth. What this would capture is to say, of all of our students, we want all of our students to grow, right? That's absolutely the goal. And so this would be looking at ensuring that regardless of where you fall along that continuum, that, that you would be able to meet or exceed what your expected growth would be.
So is STAR able to say, this student made this percentage? Like, is it something that the computer is going to print out after a test saying they made this percentage of growth, so it's not a subjective thing that somebody says, oh, well, I think it was this percentage? Is it something that they already have in their formulas that they already are going to, that it's a computer-generated thing
It's a computer generated.
Okay.
Yes.
for that part? Great. Okay.
For the PSAT, I believe we're all familiar with the SAT, and PSAT is preliminary, and we are really looking for our 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade students to have access to taking that test or that assessment. We have some data, and we thought that the number of students taking the PSAT is certainly a great indication of where we're moving as a system. And you can see 18-19 had 151 students. This year was 119, so you see a dip. And just talking to some of the staff, that's really about making sure that all of our students are aware of this opportunity. One of the things that we do know is that Gear Up is paying for all of our 10th graders. So that is a free assessment, correct? So it's really about how we are getting out and sharing that information with our students. So we didn't do a good job for this year, that's why you see that dip, but you can see for our next year, it'll be 165, and then we're going up in 2021, 22, 210 students. And we thought that was a good indicator as well.
So I have questions with that one
Yes.
too. Shocking, I know. If a student takes it 1 year and they decide that their score is not high enough and they take it another year, are they counted twice? Or are they only counted one time?
I'm gonna let Amy answer that question.
Oh, I see. That's why you're all looking over there.
Yes.
I was like, what are you doing?
They, depending on what grade band they're in, so if they're a sophomore, let's say, then we measure them just as a 10th grade taker. But these numbers are, if you see right after PSAT, you'll see the letters NM, SQT, and that's because as juniors, they also qualify for the national merit. So that's really where the high stakes are. That's where we want to boost our numbers. So if they took it as a 10th grader and weren't satisfied and they retook it as a junior, their scores would be counted in the next year's grade band.
Right. So I get that on their transcripts, it's going to show the higher number. But what I'm saying is, according to these numbers that are going to be, is a student counted twice potentially?
So if I'm a 10th grader this school year, I would be in that number, and then again as an 11th grader next year. Yes. Now
Okay.
remember, the PSAT is just an indicator, so their scores aren't really put on their transcripts. That would be the actual SAT. So
Okay.
we know that this preliminary test is what indicates their success on that test and what we need to do to boost their scores when they actually take it for college-going purposes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just passing or coming
Right.
within a range, it's just taking a PSAT.
So like
Blah,
Dr.
blah,
Hirsch
blah.
said, we chose to go with participation at this
Okay.
point because you can see the dip. That number 210 in the 21-22 school year is 60% of the kids in that class, which is where we need to be every year because that's how many kids go to a 2 or a 4-year school. So the numbers before that don't indicate that enough of our kids who are capable of going to a college, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year, are taking the tests that they need to be taking. So our goal is that this will keep us accountable up to the point where we can at least get everybody to take the test, see what they can do, and then we'll work on the things that we need to do within the test, boosting their scores and test-taking practices and all of that.
So the 210 is 60% of the junior class that year, is what you're saying? Because junior, it sounds
350
like
is
it's
the
the
number
most.
we went with because that's about what that class averages now,
Okay.
give or take a few kids. But that number, yes, is 60%, which is what our trend data for years and years shows. Approximately 32% of our kids go to a 4-year or, a 2-year, and then 28% go to a 2-year, sorry.
So it balances out to be about 60 altogether.
All right, that's all for that line.
When you look at the next one, you have academic acceleration classes, so looking at AP and dual credit. And when you look at the numbers that are consistent across the board, which really represents our capacity as a system of what we can handle. In talking to certain staff, that number could actually increase, but then we have to make master schedule decisions. So we would have to move certain classes to bring in another AP class, or say for instance, or another dual credit class.
So the same with this line, a student could be counted more than once?
Yes.
Okay, or typically is, because like Taylor, the example of you, how many AP or dual credit classes do you have right now?
2, 3.
Okay, so just to confirm, that counts every class that is taken, not the student.
Correct.
Okay.
For the next one, just think of classroom-based assessment as another word for common formative assessments. These are assessments that are given regularly at every school, including middle school and high school. Some of these are available through OSPI. We've been using common formative assessments or classroom-based assessments, but we've not been capturing that data for the metrics for our scorecard. So it's not a new metric, but it's new to the scorecard that we'll be capturing this year. Some schools and some districts will do the common formative assessments on sometimes every 6 weeks, or maybe even more frequent than that, or maybe every 9 weeks. So that's the assessment that you'll see us bring forward on this scorecard as well. And the reason why you see the blank there is because, again, we've been using that, but we've not been capturing that data for specific purposes of the scorecard. For the next one, you see that we have project-based learning product rubrics. So one of the things we have done last year is we had percent of students participating in PBL, but we've never really captured the data around students meeting standards on the PBL. So in one piece of evidence that I provided for you, if you open up some of those links, you actually will see the rubric for PBL. So eventually all of our teachers will be PBL trained. They do use a rubric, and just to share with you, the rubric is divided up. On the top it says, lacks features of an effective PBL lesson, needs further development, or the other right-hand side where we want teachers to be says, includes features of effective PBL. So that's the rubric that we're talking about.
So you're saying you're judging the teachers, not the students on this one?
No, it's the students.
Oh, okay.
So students
You said-
meeting proficiency.
okay.
But
All right,
the
the
teachers are the ones
students.
that's following the rubric as they're teaching the lesson to the students. And then the students are
Okay.
measured to see if they are meeting proficiency on that PBL unit.
Okay.
So that's a little bit different from last year. SEL, building programs, that's really implementation. One of the things we're excited about already is that every school in our system is doing SEL. This is different, but we'll be able to share that data whenever we bring it back. CTE completers, I think you've heard a lot from Amy Paris about our 5 pathways, but there's 3 pathways specifically that qualify as CTE completers. And you want to talk a little bit more about that, Amy?
I love the scorecard. So a CTE completer student would be a student that completes 4 courses in the same pathway. So agriculture, business, human services. So through Cedars and Skyward, we're able to run a report that says, you know, I might be a junior, and in my sophomore year and my junior year, even my freshman year, I took 4 classes in culinary, or 4 classes in welding and construction. And a completer is identified as 360 hours. So that would be 4 semester courses in the same pathway. And the research shows that if a student completes that, they're much more likely to see themselves in that pathway, know what it takes to get their post-secondary do what they need to do and actually complete that. So that's an indicator of success in our career and technical program. So this particular thing on the scorecard shows how many students in September of every year, based on their transcripts up to that point, however old they are, has completed 4 courses in any one of those 3 CTE pathways.
In each?
In one. So
Right, so the wording on the line says number of students in each pathway. So there's 3 pathways that,
there's
what does
3 that we can
CTE
measure.
stand for again?
Career and technical education.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yep. And so within that, we have agriculture, business, and the human services, which includes our family and consumer science courses, everything in fiber arts, the child development, our law enforcement class. What we can't measure through CTE, through this particular scorecard component, are the VEPA, the visual and performing arts, and the STEAM, because those aren't really CTE type of programs, or we don't have enough courses in our kind of medium to small high school to be able to measure that. So we've talked about other ways to measure those particular pathways, but this is a great way to start because it kind of forces our department to look at what more do we need to offer, where are the kids telling us the interest lies, where's the industry standards that we need to offer our kids. So this completer is great information for us within the school and the department to know this is the outside telling us what we need to do in our school district to make our kids better for the future.
So you graduate how many students each year, average? 360?
The classes are slowly getting bigger. It's between 300 and 320 right now.
So is this per pathway? That's, I guess what I'm,
So
if it's 360, then these numbers are low.
That's not what we're graduating. We're graduating about 240.
So per school year. So with these numbers that the CTE indicators tell you are that many students in September when we were able to run those reports and upload that have completed 4 courses in one specific pathway. So what that information tells us is I'm going to go after those kids to make sure that they are taking the next steps in culinary or in welding or in health sciences or whatever their completion is. So those numbers are really good for us, and we chose to go in increments of like 25 each year because as we add courses and beef up our system and course-taking patterns, if that many kids continue to have that kind of success in a pathway, that's really good for us. So we're not really comparing to any number necessarily. Some kids are choosing complete college-bound courses and don't have anything to do necessarily with the CTE pathway.
Okay.
I think 4 and 5 year graduation rate is not a new metric. You can see what we have placed there. For the high school and beyond plan, really we're not addressing 7th graders, so we actually would like to correct that. If it's going to be approved by the board, it should just say 8th graders, so we're reaching out to our 8th graders and really making sure that our 8th graders at MMS have a high school and beyond plan. And eventually, by the time everyone graduates, everyone will have the high school and beyond plan. But we really want to start young, and we're starting in the 8th grade. So that's why you see for this particular year, we have 80% and then moving forward. And this is just specifically an 8th grade metric, not a 7th grade, just to clarify. And then percent of OSD graduates with a high school and beyond plan by 12th grade, really that's mandated by the state that all of our students have a high school and beyond plan. So that's why you see 100%, and that is not unrealistic, it's a mandate. So that's why you see that across the board. And again, with the finance course, you see us by the time 2021 rolls around, all of our juniors and seniors will be taking that course. So that's why you see 100%. So that is something that will actually happen in our system. That's mandated.
So just seniors currently take that course?
Is it just seniors now? 11th and 12th.
Okay. My concern is those students that decide to drop out or something. Those are students that I think also need this program. And so I don't disagree with it being graduates, but I wonder if it should say 11th and 12th graders instead of graduates, so that those numbers are captured as well. I would rather see that everyone, that you're trying to reach every student, even those that it's obvious they're not going to be there. Is this currently a Desert Oasis class as well?
Yes.
Okay. And just input is what I'm trying to give you, and
I think the
perspective.
reality is, I think 11th and 12th graders are taking that, Amy.
Yeah, juniors and seniors.
So you're just saying, just for optics, that it should not say graduates, that it should say 11th and 12th graders.
Yes, and I don't know how that would be changed for you, for your version of things, because I think that that's essential for every student, not just graduates, from my perspective.
How about the word scholars?
Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess my thinking is everybody who we guide through this process, we're hoping that they graduate.
Of
So
course.
certainly, like going into your junior year, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years, but you would be told, or recommended that you take that course. Same with Desert Oasis, no matter what tier you're in, even the Open Doors policy now through SkillSource
Great.
has our same graduation requirements. So that's really good news. So really, it does.
So you're really
include
doing that
every
already,
kid.
is what it sounds like. It's just the wording on here
Yes.
Right.
is my concern, is
Yeah.
really what it is. Okay,
And I think I captured from Ken scholars.
perfect.
Is that fine?
Mm-hmm.
When we look at the next one, we see high school credits earned in middle school. So we're talking about Algebra 1, we're talking about geometry, and we're talking about Spanish. And since this is an ENS 2, graduation and achievement, we thought that this would be a great indicator as those numbers increase. So right now, 221 credits out of those classes in middle school. So again, seeing that increase in future years.
Is that a Washington history is also in that area?
No.
Okay. Then why is it only in 1 year? Just take the mic and keep it with you, Amy.
So Washington history is a requirement for 7th graders, but it's a waiver. So we just have
Oh,
to
I
be able to
see.
show
Okay.
that they've had
Not
that
actually.
curriculum, but it's not actually credit. So this number is generated by our Spanish, algebra, and geometry.
Okay. But my question is, why is it blank? I mean, you have 1 year, but why is the rest blank? Oh, John, you get to answer something.
I'm going to do my best. On the very bottom has a key to look at is as far as reporting out to make sure we don't see any major declines or things that are happening throughout the year. But for these courses, the students need to be prepared to be successful in those courses. And so depending on year to year, cohort to cohort, the number of students that are ready to be successful in attempting to earn high school credit in middle school may vary. And
Okay.
so that's the reason for it. But we certainly want to report it and capture it, because if we see a sudden decline or something weird that way, then we should be asking questions about our system. But that's why we didn't try to set goals for that
Okay.
and inadvertently try to push kids into courses that maybe they're not ready for.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the last one is really a fitness goal. Since this is under graduation and advancement, you'll see personal health as one of the items on the left-hand side. So we have that as a fitness goal. More and more students taking physical education between 7th and 12th grade. Then the last one is ENS 3, personal responsibility and citizenship. I don't think these are new as far as the average daily attendance, but I think what you saw at the last report card, that we had some unrealistic goals. And I think one of the conversations we shared when we came back is 97.5 is certainly something that we desired to attain, but it was really just unrealistic. And we saw also from the data that we reported out to the board that we were actually above the state average. So what we decided to do is to look at elementary average daily attendance, middle school and high school, the current reality, and then project goals based on the current reality. So you'll see a progression. It really gets us close to where we would like to be, that desired 97.5, but it's more realistic. I think the next ones are very self-explanatory. Percent of students without an actionable referral at the elementary school. We thought this would be a great metric to measure, 82%. I think I shared this in an email to the board. Even though we're headed certainly in the right direction at the middle school, we certainly need continued support. And I think I shared this as a piece of evidence with you that 43% of our students without an actionable referral at the middle school. So even though they're moving in the right direction, still needing support in that area. And that's realistic for them, but you can see that they've progressed 10% each year there as well. And then the high school. The next one, students without suspension or expulsion, that is not a new metric. Percent of ninth grade students on track to graduate, 81% currently right now, and seeing that increase by 2 percentage points each year. And then we thought this would be a great metric as well to bring to the board. You see NA, because we didn't capture that data. We are doing the attendances, but we did not capture the percent of students attending the conferences. And we thought that this was great under this category because it really demonstrates students taking personal responsibility for their action, for their lives, for their goals, and being at those conferences and listening to the teachers as well and taking that feedback.
So are you wanting that in the elementary levels as well? Because I know at the middle school and the high school, it's student-led conferences, but what about in the elementary ages?
Well, we have K through 12. There, you want to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the conferences could be either the student-led or teacher-led conferences, but just so whatever age or group that we're looking at, what would be the max number of conferences that we could have, that we schedule, that we hope to have, versus those that actually come and participate in that. So it'll be a combination of both the teacher-led and the student-led.
And then the last one is just percent of students participating in an extracurricular activity. And I think here we're just thinking about the whole child, not just academics, not just referrals, but really extracurricular activities. So seeing an increase in participation each year. So that's the scorecard. And again, the great thing about this scorecard is the approach that we use and really getting feedback from teachers. So this really represents their words as well.
So you didn't want to set future goals for the extracurricular activities? That's just, again, one of those, you're going to capture that and give us the info, but not a specific goal.
Yeah, at this point, it was to capture to see, what sort of percentage that we have to keep us in check. Again, to make sure that we don't have any sort of declines. And in the future, as we begin to track this over a year, I think we'll be in a position that we could set some goals for that.
So there's a proposed scorecard for our board to consider.
So the board formally approved the last scorecard, correct, Dr. Hurst? Yes. So this would be why it's on for a vote to approve again, as it's changed.
Percentage of teachers that participated in the process, Chris, or approximate?
Do we have a number on that? percentage of teachers?
So I don't have that. The biggest piece with the teacher participation was around the Smarter Balance goals. And so that was conducted over one of the district PLC days. And so, and it was an opportunity, another piece of feedback that we received from last year was, can we look at cohort, so student group to student group, and follow that along and set a goal based on that information. And so that was another piece that we received feedback on, tried to make an adjustment for. And so that was the big piece. And then some of these are more specific. For example, as Amy was able to speak to some of the high school pieces, and or working with Jenny McCordy on extracurricular athletics and those sort of pieces. So it varied. That's a good question, but I don't want to try to give a percentage without.
And the reason
without
for
going
the
through.
question, of course, I mean, we need buy-in from everyone here, and I just want to make sure that when this is approved, we don't start getting the comments from teachers that they weren't involved, these goals are unrealistic, what are they thinking, and all this. That's the only reason why I asked. Just making sure that everybody had an opportunity to be involved.
So I think just to clarify what John was saying, we don't want to mislead
Sure.
anyone. I think one of the key pieces was around ends one and some of the academic data, but specifically around the SBA. So I think what you're hearing, and I think also what you're hearing is that there's certainly some components that pertain to certain individuals, like Y Kids is really specific to preschool, and that conversation is really relegated to that individual, or those individuals.
I'd be a little nervous, not nervous. I'm more apprehensive to approve this knowing that there's going to already be a few word changes. I would rather wait for it to be, those few things to be perfected before we approve.
I captured the word scholars in one. Was there another?
You wanted to take out the 8th and just, or sorry, take out the
Oh, sorry, the
7th and
7th
just
grade.
had the 8th.
The 8th, okay.
Just a suggestion, if you take out the word scholars in one, do you want to take out the word scholars in the one above it as well? To be consistent?
So add the word scholar.
Add the word scholars.
Or sorry, add the word scholar instead of graduate, yes.
Instead of graduate,
We can do that.
yes.
So that's a good suggestion, Jen. I think it's been explained to the board, so it would be pretty, even possibly in required approvals at the next meeting with just those verbiage changes.
I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
Then no vote on that, so it'll be tabled. Sounds like required approvals is where the board would like to see it next time.
Awesome.
We'll move on to item C5 then, superintendent informational items. Let's see, there's a recommendation for what used to be called M&O levy is now educational programs and operations levy.
I have some questions here. Shocking. My personal property and then the property that that my building for work is at, both raised dramatically in their values in this past year. So my concern is, does this, and I can't get my screen to refresh, but maybe I'll have to figure that out later. Does this take into account, what is the final number? Because it's broken down as to amount that's received per year, and then also the average per $1,000 of your assessed value. But if my property value went up $50,000, and that's a huge jump. So which number is the accurate number? Which one's the estimate and which one's the real thing, I guess, is what I'm asking.
So in the table in the background information, the line for 2020 assessed values, that 1.4 million or billion, I think that's billion. So that is an estimate. Those values are yet to be determined, as you just mentioned. Everyone's getting lovely assessed value statements from the assessor. And so I'm actually going to be calling them tomorrow morning to see if they have an estimate Oftentimes they are very reluctant to give that out too early. So we will see. Or there is an inflation. This number is actually from a document produced by OSPI. And I know that they inflate the assessed values each year, as you can see from 2019 at 1.3 to 2020 at 1.4. So there is inflation built in there, whether it is going to match, what the real number is, or whether it's going to match what the assessor thinks the real number is going to be. Those are all just predictions, and if we had a nice little crystal ball here, that'd be great. But that 1.4 million is an estimate based on the information that OSPI gathered for their document.
So are they basing, does the assessor, when coming up with the taxes, do they say the levy collection amount for this year will be $3,050,000?
So
We're taking that number and dividing that, or how does that work out? I guess is what I'm asking.
So I guess just some history. So the way it used to work is that we as a school district would tell the county, we want you to collect X number of dollars from our taxpayers. So the big total, 3.3 million, or whatever it was for that year, right? And then the county would divvy that out based on assessed values to everybody. And so that would include our Franklin County and our Grant County folks as well. So that's how it used to work. And then the law changed. And so you can still do it that way, but you can also ask the county to basically roll back or adjust your taxes to equal a certain dollar amount per thousand. You're not going to see that really in a resolution to the voters, which is what this is. You would see that action more on your annual certification, which we'll actually be doing at next meeting when there's the formal resolution for the EPNO. I know it's, Educational Program and Operations Levy. I know it's confusing because we have two going on at the same time, but they are two separate things. So this is information for rerunning and asking the voters to approve the renewal of the old maintenance and operations, so the new educational programs and operations levy. So that's what this is about.
Okay, so
Did that
you
answer?
said you could ask either way. Which way is the
You can ask the
intent?
county, the
Right.
voters, you have to do a total dollar amount and an estimated rate per thousand of assessed value. So you have to specify both in your resolution.
Okay.
And you put in there that you're looking at estimated amounts and that kind of language. And you can see I estimated about a 4% increase on assessed value, and that's after this big 2020 jump. So we'll see kind of what the next few years look like.
So this is just information. We're actually voting at the next meeting. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, so
Right?
this is just strictly information, just a, I guess, recommendation for the future. And I would welcome any discussion if you guys would like to see something different. Obviously, we'll need to know that. The filing deadline, I believe, is December 13th, or around there. And so, having a resolution done in November is ideal. December, the first meeting would work. It would be a little bit of a crunch time, but.
So this was the M&O levy that was passed last time for 18, 19, and 20. What's the actual collection rate this year?
The rate per thousand?
Yeah.
$1.50. That was what we were legally limited to for 2019. In 2020, that goes up to $2.50 legally, but from the budget, we decided $1.50 is what we'll be using.
Do you know what the rate was at the end of 2018? What we were at?
Yeah,
That was that
I believe it's the
239?
Yeah.
So the reality is that we're asking for an 84-cent increase.
84 cents per thousand.
Per thousand in 2021.
Well, it would be based on collections, yes. Based on what the voters last approved, no.
Right. But the voters didn't approve the state levy.
No, they did not.
Yeah. So I'm just saying to point that out.
Yeah, and it is definitely confusing now that we have, you know, way different legal law than what we had previously. I mean, voters and us were very used to what the voters approve is what you collect. But, you know, now we have, I guess, more flexibility in that. We had flexibility before, but we can ask for voters, you know, to approve a certain dollar amount and then choose to go below that.
Other question I have is, what are your expectations for the needs for that, essentially that extra 84 cents per thousand that you're recommending we ask the community for? What would be the need and use of that extra money?
So the need is the same need that has always been there. We've been, you know, making do with what we have, right? That's what we do. That's what I do every day. But so, you know, facilities are a growing need. So addressing some of the facilities issues. I know you guys probably saw all the signs on the bathrooms. Our water is out. So just, you know, addressing emergency things like that.
All right, any other questions from the board regarding the superintendent informational item? We move on to item C6, pre-approved presentation to the board. We're getting our Ludicog Elementary School presentation.
While they're coming up, I can't get on the internet. I'm sorry. I've tried a bunch of different things.
Right down here.
Right, but doesn't that say that it's fine?
Try to redo it, try to relog back on.
You have to hold it for a while. No, I just watch people try that every time.
All right. I am Jen Perez, the principal at Ludicog Elementary, and this is my esteemed colleague, Amy Wright, the assistant principal there. And just for the community, you're sitting so you can see our face and hear our voices, so I better let you say hello. Hello. We are going to stand actually by our presentation, so you'll be able to hear our voices and see the slides that we're talking about. We are much more comfortable presenting that way. So if it's amenable to you all, we will do that. But the school board visited our school a couple weeks ago, actually. It's kind of long in between our visit from you all at our site to our presentation. And we wanted to just celebrate a few things with you about our school. So in the presentation right now, you should be seeing out about our program, our OSD dual language program. We serve kindergarten through 6th grade students at Ludicog, and we have approximately 644 students currently enrolled. As the school board came to our school, we were really wanting to celebrate our dual language program, and everything that we do revolves around our improvement and continued implementation of that program. And so over the past 2 years, we've been adjusting our program based on our data and research that we've done. We're still on that slide, Talia, thank you. We are working so that all of our students are learning to read and write in both English and Spanish. So that's something that's unique to our campus and our the way that we approach bilingual education at our building. So our students that have moved on, and it was very timely to talk about the report card because there are certain things that we like to celebrate, which includes any of our kids who've gone on to MMS and then to the high school who may be earning high school credits in the middle school. And so after the board visited with us, we thought it would be timely to share that we learned that 21 of our dual language Spanish students, they received credits via the STAMP assessment in the middle school. 21 students from all 3 other schools also received credits, so 42 students overall, half of them being from Lutakaga. So we thought that was an important information to share. That's why we have a picture of our 6th graders up there. Well, they're 7th graders now. And so our ideal state would be to continue to report those numbers to you, what is happening with the students from Lutakaga as they move on from our school. So on the next slide, we have an image of our teachers. In End 1, to improve our overall assessment scores and any measures that we're collecting around our students' achievement and their movement towards growth, making growth in any area, a lot of the work comes around improving our initial core instruction. And so this year, if you go to the next slide, our district as a whole is working on the big 3. One of the big 3 that everyone in the Othello School District is working on is teacher clarity. And the reason we're doing that is because if everyone is very clear, if students are very clear on what they're learning, they can make that outstanding growth of more than a year's growth in a year's time. And so we wanted to share with you, capturing what it looks like for Lutakaga teachers to have clarity was difficult for us because the conversations are what you would want to hear. So we wanted to try to bring that to light for you with some images. So right here we have our 1st grade team. Every single team at Lutakaga, including our special education team, we have self-contained classes at our school, and they also need teacher clarity. We have our specialist team, they need teacher clarity time. Every team is going to get 4 days of teacher clarity learning, professional development, and planning time together with their team. It's typically led by myself, Amy, or Mrs. Samaron, our instructional coach, so they're not just left to their own devices. We have a very clear process using the Teacher Clarity Playbook. So we've ordered that for everyone in our school. We've used some of our school improvement dollars to help us to do this, to provide real-time professional development for our teachers that they are turning around and using right away in their classrooms. So in our kindergarten and 1st grade classes, our teachers have to know what their partner teacher taught in reading and what the difference is between the languages in English and Spanish. And so this image helps you, well, it's indicated to show how they're leaning over, they're digging in, they're really talking about the nuances in language so that they can be super clear when they're teaching with their students, and we'll have even more of our students reaching proficiency in both English and Spanish, not in just one language. Another example, we have our 2nd grade team created these 2 posters, so it just gives you another view into what does it look like when teachers go back to their classroom and they've had a couple days of planning with their team. What is it going to look like when they get back in their classroom? Well, you're going to see interactive posters that they've created and they've color-coded. If I'm an English reader and I know what the poster looks like in my English classroom, and then I go into my Spanish classroom and I'm like, hey, the teacher color-coded it the same. That's the same chart. Okay, what do I know about this content already? How do I draw on both languages so that I can continue learning? And so that's something that's very important for our teachers and our students. If they're not clear on what they're learning, it's going to be much harder for them to get there. So if you go to the next slide, I did get some feedback from Dr. Hurst around this slide, and I do apologize if it's difficult for you to see. I'd be happy to share any of our documents with you. But we wanted to just share what does it also look like, what are teachers producing, what are teams producing. These are documents that they're creating to be able to be enhanced and reused year over year as they improve their instruction. And one key, so these are all the components that are within the Teacher Clarity Playbook. So they go through a process of unpacking the standard, understanding what it really means, what are the big learning progressions that kids have to be able to do, and then really importantly, and what Amy and I see when we go into the classrooms, are what is the learning intention and success criteria? What do kids have to be able to do to show the teacher that they understood that content? And so our teachers are creating those based on the standards, and they're also identifying how are they going to assess if kids know how to do that. How are they going to know if the students reached the success criteria at the end of the lesson or the unit? Also, what's very important for our school here is that teachers are taking the time right in the process of learning to translate these to make sure they understand as a team of teachers, are they going to say this the same way? Is Amy going to say it the same way to her students that I was going to say it to mine? Do we agree on what does it really look and sound like when we present this information to students? And so they have it translated, and our Spanish teachers are able to help our English teachers find the cognates and understand where should they really pull out that information to help the kids continue learning. So you can go on to the next slide. I feel my voice is shaking. I do apologize. I'm like, every year I present and every year I get nervous. So End 2, we wanted to highlight a few of the things that we were doing in End 2. And on the report card, you saw us at the elementary levels, we're really reporting about project-based learning and how many kids are involved in a project and something that they can move forward with to share with the community or that they can make an impact. So this image is actually a panel of experts in our community. You may recognize some of them. And our 5th grade students were completing a project. If you go to the next slide. They were completing a project after they completed their ecosystems unit for science, and actually our teachers integrate all their content. So their science and Spanish language arts and English language arts all led to the students learning about the ecosystem, the things that impact our ecosystem. And then they asked the panel of experts what could they really do to help their community. And they talked about a lot of trash around Othello, and just our sheriff that was there explained how many people, like, he finds illegal dumping everywhere. And they even asked myself about how can they keep the school community clean. The presentation and their whole project was done in Spanish, and so our students asked the questions of the panel in Spanish, and then they had to have interpreters to ask them the questions in English. So that was really an amazing process to be part of. And on these next several slides, we just have some examples of the public service announcements that our students created. And this links back to End 1, because now our teachers are giving us that data around how many kids met that project-based learning rubric that Dr. Hurst was talking about earlier. How many kids met proficiency? Every kid had to have a visual. They needed a chart. They needed a slogan. It should be eye-catching. This is a public service announcement. You're putting it up. It should be easy to read. If you scroll, Talia, we can see a few more. So some students, they were able to finish their project in Spanish, and they wanted to make them in English. So we have a few posters. And our teachers are now, if you scroll to the next one, working on where in the community would be great places to put these up to help make our citizens aware of what our 5th grade students really saw as what are things that we could ask the community to do to help support our environment and our ecosystem. So we had some of them had created typed versions of their posters. So another piece of that we're working on is learning the difference between project-based learning and STEAM activities. And so our amazing specialists and our 4th grade team embarked on trying to figure that out a bit. And what it comes back to really make sure it's the PBL unit is that we're referring back to those gold standard rubrics that we've learned about through that professional development. And so that is the next piece for our 4th grade team and the specialists. So students on the 4th grade team worked with the art teacher to create the water cycle that you'll see here. They also worked with our technology teacher and our librarian to use Hyperduinos to make their projects interactive. So Hyperduinos are a technology that the students can code on the computer, and then these actually have lights and touch points that you'll be able to see in the video. And so we're going to show you the project that our 4th graders did. We do apologize about the quality of video and maybe sound. We will make it better for next time, but
setups, our students were able to link touch sensors and LED lights to self-created videos in both English and Spanish. The water cycle, which is a core lesson for 4th grade, was taught in their science classes. The visual aid posters were created in their art classes, while in library and technology, they mastered using the board with the Media Linker app, making it possible to put together these amazing projects with interactivity and dual language support. The students worked in teams of 2 to 3, making it possible for them to collaborate, problem solve, and think innovatively. This yielded a tangible project for public display. Great job, 4th grade students, teachers, and specialists.
All right, so the problem solving that goes into a project like that, learning to work with a team member, and then the ability that students have to then present what they learned about the water cycle using that awesome technology, were all things that we wanted to highlight and share with you. So.
And the last one is ENS 3. ENS 3, we're going to talk about refining our system for acknowledging expected behaviors. And the picture in the background may seem like an odd one, but it's what we're going to explain to you. So can you go to the next piece? So our previous system for acknowledging expected behaviors or behaviors we want students to do every day was to give them these pride paws, and they went in a drawing and they got pulled for a pizza raffle once a week. By the time they're out of 2nd grade, they're like, yay. And it wasn't really effective. Kids are like, why do I want to earn them? I don't want the pizza. And so I met with students last year and I said, hey, what do you want? What would matter to you? What changes should we make? I worked with our PBIS team. Can you go back to the previous one just a little bit? To redo our Pride Paw system. We're really, really great at communicating when things are not going well at school, but how many times do we tell the parents the great things that are happening? And really wanting to revise our Pride Paws so that not only are we acknowledging students at school, but we're also letting them tell their parents. Because in previous years, the kindergartners would sneak them home, and then sometimes they'd get back and sometimes they wouldn't. And I mean, that's a great problem to have, but I really want to be able to acknowledge them too. So we worked with our team to come up with a new design so that this part of the ticket is cut off and put into one of these 4 raffles for the week. So, and each week we pull one raffle and we announce them on the announcements and kids come down. The things that are selected, you'll see those are all Ludicaga gear. That's what they really wanted. I was very surprised, but that's what even our older kids are like, I want a shirt or socks or hat. So we're making it happen with our PTA that's partnered with us to help us acquire these things. Can you go to the next one? And so it's one of the ways that we've revised our system. We've also had conversations with our staff about, hey, hand them out like candy. You want to acknowledge all of the behaviors that are happening that are great things, then really, how many positive to negatives are you giving? Like, let's amp it up. We can do this. And so we also have a system now for tracking them. Before, they went to a raffle for the whole year, but I never knew, hey, is that one student, have they gotten a Pride Paw in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd? Have they? I couldn't answer that question unless the student could tell me. We now have a system to track them. So after the drawing is pulled, all of those get entered into a spreadsheet that we have, and that information I've shared with teachers. Hey, just so you're aware, these are the students who haven't gotten anything yet. Not because I want them to falsely seek out kids, but hey, you know, that kid always does the great thing and I haven't written them one yet. Or today, Rob was doing a really great job. I need to acknowledge that and not lose that in my day. And so we also have created supporting documents to ensure that myself and Jen and also our ISS para who helps with behavior are making sure we're following the new discipline law changes to make sure we're in compliance. And so far this year, between the beginning of the year and now, we've had 463 Pied Paws that have been entered into the drawing. But when I shared this with my staff, many teachers are like, wait, the 6th graders are hoarding them. They're waiting for something they really want in the drawing so they can increase their odds. So they have them everywhere. And I know that sounds funny, and I chuckled at first, but then I really reflected and said, that means it's working. Because they now have a value to getting that reinforcer of, way to go, good job. It means something to them. There has some value to it. So the changes seem simple, but they're really intentional to really have the ownership of the students, but also to make sure we're acknowledging the great things that are happening, because they are happening. And this picture, the board has already seen it once, but it's so good I want to share it again. This is a picture of a gentleman who came to an assembly where our PTA was kicking off our jogathon. It's our big fundraiser for our school. And instead of having someone interpret in Spanish and in English, he actually was interpreting in Mixteco. And it was really awesome because we really value and want to raise the status of Spanish, but we also have lots of students who are embarrassed to admit that they speak Mixteco. And we're really looking for ways to elevate that language too, because our students are not just bilingual, some of them are trilingual or more. So why, if we value that and we think like, that is amazing, you have these skills, how can we showcase this and how can we as a school show that it matters to us? It was really wonderful when he started talking, there was kind of a hush over the whole crowd. And then there was, you could hear them all talking to each other. When he finished the first chunk of information that he was interpreting, the kids broke out into applause on their own. They just started cheering for him. And what a positive way to connect with our community and our students and to really reaffirm their identity. Like I said, too good not to share.
Thank you. It's an opportunity for the board to make some comments about the visit.
It's always fun to come to your school and to be able to hear the students really have a sense of family at your campus. That's always something that I've noticed and seen that, and I don't know if it's the language piece or just the environment at your campus, that they're bonded to each other, and that's really important to see. Just that they love being there and they love it, the people that they're with.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved meeting with the kids. And like you said, there was a couple there that were multilingual languages. And it was nice to see some of the changes that have been made the past year to include all grade levels in the dual language program.
Yeah, as always, that was a great visit. Thank you for your opening information on what happened after they left Lutakaga. That was good to hear. Congratulations, half of them came from Lutakaga, so kudos to you and your staff. And overall, it's great, like Jen says, and I think it's happening at more schools. I don't know if it's the SEL piece that's been incorporated this year, but I've noticed a cohesiveness among students. Our meeting with the teachers or the staff was also very informative. I mean, there was people making comments, so that was a good thing. And again, overall, just a great visit, and kudos to you and your entire staff. You guys are doing a good job. Keep it up.
Thank you.
I mentioned when I was there, but you guys set the bar for student interviews now. So meeting with those students, it just was good that they were so prepared. loved, they all took part in it. It was just, that was, it was like one of those things where usually I look at the clock and I'm going, what are we gonna talk about for the next 5 minutes? And that was like, our time's up, what? So that was good. Hopefully, that word gets out and the other schools can model.
They know how to
whatever your approach
contact
was.
us, so.
What's that?
They know how to contact us, so whoever's next.
Right. So great job, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item D1, monitoring reports from superintendent for executive limitations. We have EL10, EL13 in here. It's an opportunity for some clarification if the board needs it. And then I guess we'll move on. No.
So for EL10 on page 3, you have this chart in both reports. And you talked a little bit about it when you got to the scorecard, that 8th grade becomes the new 12th grade year. They make decisions for high school pathways and those kinds of things. My question and concern is, I know how many times I changed my major in college. And what happens if they decide that it's not something that they want to be in, or they really want to and need to experience everything?
That's a good question, Jen. I think our approach has been exposure and not mandates. So in other words, looking at that chart, you can see that we developed a system where we're exposing students to multiple opportunities or multiple pathways. And I think we shared all along that we believe that it's our responsibility and our duty to make sure that our students early on is getting that exposure, which is why you see it starting at even pre-K. And I think you've even probably been to some teachers' classrooms where they're doing some of these projects in kindergarten. And again, we're not trying to lock them in. We're just trying to expose them to multiple opportunities that really aligns to some of the pathways that I think Amy was talking about, but
Okay.
especially around STEM, STEAM.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I can say that I can affirm that the exposure is beneficial and it is effective. So I've noticed that a lot of, I don't want to say my generation, but like as opposed, so in my class, there's a lot of kids who have siblings in the class above us. So I've noticed is the pathways, I didn't really like, I noticed in some of my older siblings, some of my friends who have older siblings, they didn't really have that. And so it's kind of interesting to say, like, yes, they had pause, and like we have futures, but I've noticed we kind of have like a little bit more of a grip on what we want to do, because like in my opinion, it's better to change what you think you're going to do in high school than it is to completely change your major. And so I've noticed that students now, we say we want to do this in freshman year, and then we change it in sophomore year. Even before that, we could have changed in 8th grade year and just backtracking and going through it. But then when it comes to junior and senior year, I've noticed when we go to the career showcase, the seniors are really going to the businesses that are related. So they're going to the entrepreneurs, they're going to the medical, they're going to the first responders in the agriculture, and they're staying in that field. So that's just what I've noticed. The exposure is working.
On page 4, when you, underneath number 3, you're talking about the AWSP framework, and I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's the framework that we use to evaluate our principals.
Okay.
Association Washington of School Principals. So it's the 8 criterion. And I've been sharing with all of the OSD on a regular basis, but we started off with school culture, and then what we do is we collect evidence around that, and then we go to the next criterion, which is around safety, and we collect evidence around that, and then the next one is data, and then instruction and curriculum. So there's 8 criterion that really gets to this heart of the curriculum. So curriculum is one of the actual criterion of the 8.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
it falls right in line with that AWSP framework.
Okay. On page 6, I'm not sure what page I'm even on now, personally. Okay. Right above number 5, it says, the short-term vision and core values were revisited, and that now you've changed the focus to the big 3. And I just wanted to say I love that you're constantly fine-tuning and modifying. It shows that you're not making a change, but you're pinpointing and focusing heavily on, and that you're constantly reevaluating. I love that part. And perfecting.
Yeah. And I would say that in large part was due to feedback that we received toward the end of last school year. And a lot of that feedback came from administrators, but also our teachers. And some of that came back even from the superintendent evaluation and some comments that were made just around clarity and coherence. So we had to revisit that. So this is a product of that.
So that you're listening
Yeah.
and modifying according to that and
Absolutely.
just perfecting that. I think that was great. That was all I had on 10. Does anybody else have something on 10? Okay, and we're going to 13. On page 3, let's see where near the bottom it says the literacy gap is being addressed through a research-based early literacy program and Learn Academy, and both in EL 13 and EL 10 you refer to you're addressing the literacy gap 0 to 4, but it doesn't reference where how you're addressing that other grades and ages.
So I had to be very careful on how much information I was putting in here. So the Learn Academy really is working with our parents, but also designed to support the kids that are from age 0 to 4. Correct? Or do you want to add to that?
So Learn Academy is 0 to 3,
0
and then
to
Ready
3.
for Kinder is 0 to 5.
Okay, but I guess my question is, you've addressed how you're fixing the literacy gap for those ages, but you didn't address that for other grades.
So I think that the intent here is really, it starts young, the preschool age. So I think
Okay.
the intent of putting this piece in here, before we can really get to the advanced programs and coursework available for all eligible students, that we have to really start small, so it really begins.
Okay, so
through the
it
early
wasn't that you're
literacy.
not addressing it, you're just,
Right.
that's another focus of how you're, okay, I understand.
That it
I
really
just
starts
wanted to
early
clarify.
on.
Okay,
Yes.
great, that makes sense, I just wanted to clarify that.
Mhm.
Page 6, it talks about self-selecting. Let's see. All students will have exposure to PBL and STEAM projects and will have the opportunity to self-select into one or more pathways. But 5 talks about also the automatic enrollment. So, let's see. When they're given this form for the high school academic acceleration policy, the opt-out form, when they're given this form, are the scores that they got already circled for them? Or is the student supposed to be circling and know these numbers themselves?
I'm going to let Amy explain that component.
So at the same time that they would be given the form, or the education around the form, and the selection of courses in the registration cycle, they have their scores right in front of them. So we do
Okay.
that through their futures classes.
Okay, so it's not like they're blind going, well, I
Right.
don't know.
In
I think I'm
fact,
great there, but I'm,
Conferences last week would be where they recorded their new set of scores if they had them. So, yep, they're very aware of their scores.
okay.
Yep.
So they do have to opt out with full knowledge then? With a parent?
So the through registration, we encourage kids always to challenge themselves. And so very intentionally, if they have a 3 or a 4 in ELA or math, we encourage them to take advanced courses in those 2 areas. So then after we see what kids self-selected, the counselors run lists of Smarter Balance scores and cross-reference those 2 things. So if we find a student who, going into their senior year, chose to not take an advanced course in ELA, even though they scored a 3 or a 4, they're going to be automatically put into one of those advanced courses. And then when school starts, they'll have that conversation. And the student might say, wait, I didn't pick UW English or whatever. And the counselor's going to say, well, our district chooses to challenge everybody who has the capability to do that. And that's when that conversation would happen. And if the student really doesn't want to take that course, that's when the opt-out form comes into play. And the parent would also have to sign and say, I realize my student has the capability, but for whatever reason, they're not going to take those advanced courses, and then we have that on file.
Okay.
And it's a minimal number.
Okay, gotcha. On page 10. It talks about the different cohorts for, and the different school years for the percentages of teachers trained. Since we're in year 2, can you tell me what percentage, the goal was 50% trained, what percentage has either taken PBL 101 or PBL 201?
I think we're right at our mark, so I think it is 50%. Is that correct, John? Yep.
Okay.
For the 101, and then we're in the works of how to schedule in that support for the 201. But 50% of our teachers, thereabouts, have received that initial training.
Okay, so there isn't a specific training from Buck Institute for the 201. Buck Institute's just for 101, is what you're saying?
They do offer a 201. What we're trying to work through right now is how, based on subs and all those sort of pieces, actually going to look for what they call site support visits, and so that they can go and have a little more flexibility and say, what do you need? Where are you getting stuck? And kind of work through that.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, move on to item D2, board approval of monitoring response documents. These are the monitoring response documents from last board meeting. I'll accept a motion to approve.
I motion to approve. Motion to approve response documents for items D2-1, D2-2, D2-3, D2-4, D2-5s, which are the board monitoring response documents to EL8, EL9, GP1, GP3, and GP4.
Been a motion by Director Garza to approve all monitoring response documents.
Second.
And second by Director Stevenson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. We need to go back. We do need a motion to accept the monitoring reports from the superintendent.
I move we approve the monitoring reports for EL10 and EL13.
Move to approve or move to accept?
Accept.
Been a motion to accept monitoring reports for EL10 and EL13.
Second.
By Director Stevenson, second by Director Garza. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We'll now move on to item E1. So there are several policies in here, all the ones from the approval of the monitoring response documents we just did, and then GP4, of course, would include GP 4.1, 4.1.1, 4.1.2. What's in here that is still unresolved? EL5, budget planning, we're waiting for Jeanette to come back and explain some things to us. And then GP 14.1.1 was just that simple change to submit a completed application by a date, and we decided we wanted to leave it blank so that we could just fill that date in each time rather than having to reapprove this policy each time. So GP 14.1.1 straightforward, I think, is the second reading of just taking that date out. EL 5, then we're still trying to determine the verbiage to use. Instead of consultants, I think we're at contracted employees, and there was a direct question for Jeanette. So, well, I think, Ken, you had asked the question, so
It's been far enough back. I think it was the term contracted employees and contractors was also brought up, and a complete definition of the two of them and the difference.
So I don't remember or recall, I guess, what the difference is in that specific question, but I do recall asking or being asked for OSPI's definition of a contracted employee. And so I did reach out to OSPI, and so there are several different criteria that they have for a reported contracted employee. And so reported is on the S275, which is our personnel reporting that we do annually. Actually, it's twice a year that we report. So basically the criteria is they spend more than a 0.25 FTE with students for a given school district. We have to claim those students for funding as well. The contracted agreement has to be in place before October 1st, and the contractor is not a college or university. So those are the standards that OSPI requires as far as reported contracted employees. So that's their definition. Beyond that, they don't have any, formal guidance as far as that goes.
What about your interpretation of that phrase, that wording?
It's very difficult because it's not, to me, it's still not necessarily black and white, which I think is helpful when you're looking at, I guess, a standard or an expectation of somebody is to have, of financial information is to have like that black and white. We want to know X and we want Y included in that analysis. So for me, it's still very, I guess, confusing. My interpretation of contracted employee is contracted, they go through payroll. That's my interpretation, because I guess what's been drilled into my head is contract HR, contract and payroll, not necessarily contractor or service provider, or multiple different terms that you can put on that.
my memory is that one of the questions was if a contracted employee would show up in the 80% requirement from the board. If so, would the money paid to them show up under salaries and benefits, or would it be categorized in a different way through OSPI?
My interpretation of contracted employees?
Yes.
Right, that's.
So my interpretation would be in salaries and benefits.
I think the big question is, maybe the question is, who would you not include in the contracted employees? Is there some examples now you can give us?
So not included would be any contracts that are paid via invoice. So for contracted services, mostly for our special needs students. So psychologists are example, OT, which is occupational therapy, some of those specialized services that we don't necessarily have fully on staff.
Do you have any idea how many we have?
How many service providers?
Service providers or contracted in?
So service providers, I would estimate about 7 different companies. So it's not individuals, it's companies. I would estimate about between 7 and 10, depending.
If the district decided to hire a consultant to come in one day a week to maybe give some mentorship to our admin, would you consider that a contracted employee or a contractor?
Me personally, I would not consider it part of the 80% well, sorry, what was your question? Contract or?
Would it be a contracted employee, or would it be considered, like you're saying, this company that you invoice?
So I would consider it a company that we invoice, so I wouldn't consider it a contracted employee.
So if it's if it shows when we approve the checks that are written each month, a person's name, you wouldn't include that in contracted employees?
So it's not necessarily a person's name. Many of our contractors actually have company names, so it's not their individual name.
Well, I'm just asking in that scenario.
I believe that would be difficult to manage just because we have a lot of employees who seek reimbursement, and so you see a lot of individual names on the accounts payable, so that would.
Yeah, I guess I'm not saying what would you do for the name. I'm saying if we reimburse that contractor or contracted employee directly to that person, would you still consider it a company that would be not included in salaries and benefits?
Yes.
Okay. I don't like contracted employees, apparently, as the verbiage, I guess I would say.
Maybe we can pick someone's brain at WASDA for the right.
Not sure you're going to find someone with a policy like this.
It just makes it even more complex.
I know there's.
I think Jeanette just needs to make sure that in the end that she understands the intent and can interpret the same way, and so it doesn't sound like with this verbiage, this matches the original intent. Because even with people who come in and give sped services, I think when we talk about the 80%, though, it's 80% of all revenues. So even sped revenues that are coming in, then I think the intent of that policy was that no more than 80% were going back out as salaries and benefits and
the original.
Or compensation,
Yeah,
I should say.
The original policy also included the word consultants, which to me would have covered everything that you just mentioned too, possibly.
My interpretation of consultants is slightly different. It aligns more with what Rob said, of you bringing someone in one day a week to mentor somebody. You know, to me, that's more of a consultant. You're getting a consultant, a professional development service or a professional service. You know, we bring people in quite often to train on different curriculums, STEAM, PBL, things like that. Those to me are consultants, not necessarily the special ed service providers.
So the original verbiage in the policy was more inclusive than the verbiage that the board's talking about, in your mind?
The original verbiage was
consultants.
It could be considered more inclusive. I don't necessarily know if my interpretation of that word meets the intent of the board.
So what was your issue, Ken, with
the
consultants?
issue that I was, when we were given the evidence for the policy review, consultants was never mentioned in it. We were just given our current employee status, but consultants was never mentioned in the reports at all. So that's why I brought it up and I asked at that time.
They weren't mentioned, but were they not included?
They were not included.
So the consultants were not included in the 80%?
No.
But you just said that in your mind, consultants are the people who come in to do professional development, those kind of things?
Yes, that's my interpretation of what that word is.
But not in the policy?
I was unclear exactly what that would be.
So it was more about interpretation and intent. Okay.
So I would have no problem keeping the wording consultants in there if that number would be included in the next reports listed.
So I guess my question again would be I guess the intent of the board. If the intent is, inclusive of the contractors that we bring in to provide curriculum support and things like that, if that's, what you guys would like to have included, consultants probably is a fine word, but if it's something different than that, I think, for me personally, it's not quite clear. Just looking at it from like a new person perspective.
I don't think that we could talk around and about this forever tonight, but I think that we don't quite have the right wording. Whether we go back to consultants or not, we're not there yet. So I don't think we can approve or do anything
I would say
like
it's
this.
more about the board's not doing a good job explaining the intent,
Right, so
regardless of the verbiage. But if we don't have the right verbiage, Jeanette's not going to be here forever, and so if this policy's still there, how will the next person interpret it? But if Jeanette knew our intent, maybe she could help us with the verbiage.
Do you understand what our intent is? Have we not been clear in expressing that to you yet?
I think I probably know your intent, but it's, I guess, I'm still a little bit fuzzy on it.
Okay.
Is it, I guess, all service providers or contractors or whatever terminology we want to use? Is it everybody, so even people we bring in for professional development? Or is it student-based services or, something like that? So I guess just something a little bit more clear of like, what are those people doing?
So I personally am okay with if it is inclusive of people we hire to fill a position that we would have advertised or maybe already advertised and could not fill. So for instance, we advertised for, I think I mentioned before, like the speech language, an SLP, right? And we can only fill 2 and we have a need for 4, so we have to contract for the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kind of things that I would, in my mind, that would be inclusive of.
So you're saying student, you used a word, not student.
Student-based, I think you said.
Student-based.
Student services.
Student services,
So, yeah, and that's, I don't know what that really means, that's probably pretty broad.
right.
It is pretty broad, but I think it narrows it down to
They have to
people
have
working
student
with
contact.
students. Yes.
Yes.
And that would align well with the OSPI definition as well.
So OSPI says contract employees have to spend 25% of the
Mhm.
time with students?
Let's see.
that what you had
what's their
said?
word? So they use contractor, certificated instructional employee, or educational staff associate.
Wow, I'm not sure I want to use those words.
It aligns with the funding model.
Really, if you're just looking at, in that case that I told you, then if you hired that person because you could not fill, so if it's an SLP, couldn't fill a position,
Mm-hmm.
are you paying them and categorizing it under the compensation and benefits for OSPI purposes?
So yes, not on the budget. This is in the personnel reporting. And so it wouldn't be under salaries and benefits in the budget. It would be under services, which is 7,000.
But it would have to be under salary and benefits for the purpose of telling the board where you're at in a monitoring report.
Yes, we would include it. I personally wouldn't categorize it as salary and benefits. I would probably include it as a separate item.
I think as long as it ends up in that category when we're getting a
When the
monitoring report,
report's
that's what
done
matters,
for
right?
us, right, yes. So could we change the word to student-based consultants? Is the brace the word you
Student service contractor?
student service contractor?
Student service
Are you good with
contractor.
that word?
I'm good with that.
Just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. Yes.
So what's the final? Student.
Student service contractor. So that covers speech and OT and
Contractors providing services to students.
Hence the name.
I'm good with that, changing both of those to that word.
Can you open this can?
I'm
Are
good
you
to
with
that.
it?
I think that hits a lot of the intention.
One thing
What
I
I
would
was
also suggest as I'm looking at this, that it should say administrative compensation and benefits as well. And benefits is missing from line 4.
Administration. So what would what's the right phrase now?
Student service contractor.
How would that fit into the administration section?
It's a great question.
That would
Trying to
be the
think.
kind of situation where I'd said you
Yeah.
hire a consultant to come in and mentor a new assistant superintendent or something like that.
Or if you have an interim, like, so just an example, I know ESDs sometimes contract with school districts to provide like interim superintendent services or interim principals.
Or finance person,
Or
which
finance
might have happened here a couple times.
I might have done that in a previous life. But so that would be, even though it's not direct student services necessarily for a superintendent or principal or, a finance officer, but it gets around to it.
So the same verbiage could be used.
I believe so.
And adding the word benefits.
And benefits, compensation and benefits,
So-
including student service contractors.
Hopefully we don't run into a large hiccup between now and then. And come up with some new wording phrase change.
Okay. So there's been some additional revisions to that one. I don't think you want to approve anything. So the only thing that's on the table for approval, I think that is a GP 14.1.1. Final reading, I believe, on that.
I move we approve GP 14.1.1. Final reading.
Been a motion by Director Stevenson to approve final reading of GP 14.1.1.
I will second that.
Second by Director Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item F1, the board will recess into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss potential real estate purchase or lease. No action will be taken following the executive session. We will return to a regular meeting for adjournment at the end of that executive session.
Do
Can
we,
go now?
yes, we can.